And welcome back to another episode of the Still Curtain podcast. I'm your host, Tommy Jaggi, editor of StillCurtain.com. And joining me is Still Curtain contributor and co-host, Shayne Kubas. Shayne, OTAs started, so we're going to talk about that. I know it doesn't mean a lot right now, but there is some drama already unfolding with Steelers OTAs. We're going to get into that in a second. We're going to talk about what's the buzz coming out of there right now. What are the beat reporters saying? So we'll get to that in just a minute. And Shayne, we're going to start doing some fun stuff this off season. And so today we're actually going to rank the most valuable players on the Pittsburgh Steelers 2025 roster for this upcoming season. Not necessarily the best overall players, but who holds the most value to the team in terms of their success this year. So stick with us for that. It's going to come up in the second half of the show today. But Shayne, I want to lead in with the player that we've talked about. Seems like the start of every show for March. I don't know. Aaron Rodgers. The drama continues to unfold. Some people are making more of it than what it is. He did not show up to Steelers camp. Does that have anything to do with because he's not a Pittsburgh Steeler yet, Shayne, maybe? And so if you watched like Joy Taylor and some of these guys talking about it, it's a little painful, honestly, just to see because he's not tied to the team yet.
No,
it's the Steelers. The Steelers want Aaron Rodgers, but if he's not under contract, he obviously doesn't need to be at Steelers OTAs.
Yeah, like this is a non-story at this point because until he signs, there's no reason to wonder if he's going to show up to camp or to any activities. Like he isn't on the team. Like if he did, that would honestly be kind of weird to me that he would show up. Like let's be honest about it. And yeah, like would I like him to be on the team if he's going to be on the team at this point? Yes, I would like him to be here for this. Sure. But he isn't. He's not on the team. There's no reason to worry about whether he's going to be here or not. And honestly, at this point, I think, as far as, we'll talk about this, I'm sure more, but before this does ultimately come to pass. But if he's going to be on the team, it's probably more likely to be closer to the June 10th, whenever mandatory mini camps are actually going to be happening, that we should then worry about whether he's there or not.
Yeah, Shayne, everybody and their mother has made a prediction on Aaron Rodgers, whether he would come to the Steelers. And that was actually what I was going to lead into next and ask you, like, all right, he's not on the team at OTAs. And so it's comical because we go back to like early in the offseason, we're in the free agency period. It's like, all right, Rodgers has to sign by this time. Like this is that tentative deadline we're going to set for him. And that time comes and passes and he's not. He needs to sign before the NFL draft so the Steelers know what to do. And he doesn't. He needs to sign by OTAs. Doesn't happen. And so Shayne, would you set a hard deadline if you're the Pittsburgh Steelers for June 10? Like you have to be here. This is mandatory for anybody that wants to be on the roster this year. Or would you let that time kind of linger into training camp, knowing that Rodgers is still a better option than Rudolph?
For me, if I'm doing this, I do want June 10th to be the hard deadline because at this point, I already don't really think he should be on this team. I really don't think it makes any sense to me at this point. But if he's going to be, if you are going to maximize this year, you cannot be missing important time with a new team. Like, I don't care that you're 41, 42. I don't care that you've been in the league forever. The guys around you haven't played with you before. And you have a very particular way of doing things, even if you are going to maybe lean into what Arthur Smith wants to do more, or maybe you like what he's doing and whatever else. Like, that's fine. You still haven't played with these guys. And we're not bringing your whole cast and crew. Like, we're not doing that at this point. We can't anyway if we wanted to. You have to be able to come in and actually play well right away. You're not going to be able to do that to the best of your ability if you show up in August. You're just not. That doesn't mean that you have to go through every practice and do all this stuff because you're a veteran player. But you have to be here and at least do the mental stuff. You have to work with these guys, talk to them, get on the same page. That's not happening right now. And if it's not happening by June, I just don't really see what the upside play is at that point. Like, you're really going to win that much more with him, even if he is better than Mason Rudolph? I just don't think so.
Yeah, I mean, I totally get where you're coming from there. I think now I can see it from both ways because honestly, I think that if Rodgers showed up in August and signed a contract, I think that he maybe can get you a win more than what Rudolph can, maybe a couple wins. But the problem is, it's like, would you risk doing that at the risk of losing the locker room, at the risk of having everybody be disgruntled saying, all right, Cam Hayward's 36 and he's showing up, and why can't Rodgers show up? If he knew all along that the plan is to come sign, why doesn't he show up? So I agree with you, Shayne. I think that if I was running the organization, I'd probably set that hard deadline and say, hey, look, we've given you months longer than any other free agent has had to make a decision. I feel like you either know or you don't by this point. And if honestly, and maybe that's the answer, Shayne. Maybe honestly, if Rodgers doesn't know what to do at this point, probably means he should retire. I mean, he probably should. And so
realistically, yeah. Like,
yeah, I mean, the decision has not been made by mid-June. It's like, all right, maybe it's time to hang up your cleats for good then. You're 41 years old. You turned 42 during the season this year. But I do think that I would set that hard June 10 deadline when mandatory minicamp starts. And not just for this. It's not just because of the whole Rodgers situation. It's the outlook of the team in general right now. And just knowing that the roster moves you made this offseason weren't exactly all like win now moves. Sure, you signed Darius Slay, you signed an old cornerback. Outside of that, it's like you kind of were looking ahead to the future. You traded George Pickens away.
Yeah.
You let 6 or 7 starters walk away in free agency to get loads of compensatory draft picks, which I love, by the way. I think it's a smart move.
It's a smart move.
And I don't think those guys had a big future in Steelers with Pittsburgh. But because you did those things and you didn't go the other way with your offseason decisions, I think it would be wise to kind of just turn the page in general and say, hey, we're looking ahead to the future, especially if you're not going to show up by that point.
And that's the point, kind of. It's if you're going to sign Aaron Rodgers, the only reason to do that at this point, especially with what you've done, is if you do want to try to win a playoff game desperately. And the only way you're going to do that, though, is if you get the very best version of whatever's left of Aaron, which you're probably not going to get if he shows up in August. You're just not. Like, again, this is a player that is notorious for being very particular about how he does things, how his receivers run routes, how they communicate with him, all this stuff. And yeah, maybe he's going to let some of that go, right? Like maybe that's the idea is like, well, I'm just going to kind of show up. I'm going to do what I'm supposed to do. I'm going to listen to Arthur Smith. That would be such a 180 from what we know from Aaron Rodgers that I'm not willing to assume that that's the case, right? So going off of what we know about him, the longer he's in the building before the season starts, the higher the likelihood is he's going to play well. And until he shows up, that counter is going to keep going down, right? The amount of days you have with this team is going to keep going down, and you need as much time as you can. You just do. I just don't see it going well if you don't.
Well, and some people will say, oh, he's a seasoned veteran. He's done this dozens of times. And so he's been around the league forever, but he hasn't played with this coach. He hasn't played with his teammates.
That's the point.
Developing the chemistry is honestly more important than anything else right now. And it's being there for the players, not necessarily for yourself. Even if you think that I'm good, I can whiz right through all this stuff. It means nothing. Being there for the players, I feel like, is important.
Yeah.
You got to start developing those relationships. And we know that Rodgers has had some issues with that and butting heads with people in the past. That's not where you want to be for a team that, again, from the Steelers' perspective, it's all about snapping that 8-year drought without a playoff win. I truly think that that's what their number one focus is right now. I think if they're being realistic with themselves, they probably know they're not a Super Bowl contender. It would take something miraculous to happen in the postseason, a 3-game stretch in the postseason, to get you to the biggest game on turf. And so I don't think the likelihood of that is very large at all, as evidenced by the Steelers' projected win total this year, which I'd always go over if they're projected a losing record. Until we see it otherwise happen, I would probably hit that over the 8.5 wins. But knowing their current situation, Shayne, knowing that they made these preemptive moves kind of with the future in mind rather than just the focus on 2025, I would say, let's give them the June 10 deadline. Let's talk to him one more time and say, that gives you a couple weeks to make that decision. You've pondered things for months now. We need to know because we're either going to move forward and we're going to kind of look ahead to the future, or we're going to try to do this right now. Can't have you rolling in halfway through training camp and saying, hey, it's let's get to work. Where's my contract?
Yeah, totally agree.
All right, Shayne, the other little bit more subtle news from the Steelers this week is that TJ Watt was a no-show at Steelers OTAs. Not surprising by any stretch of the imagination. We saw this exact scenario unfold in 2021. So if you were caught off guard by this, go back and look at what happened then. TJ Watt did not participate in hardly anything. He did some walkthrough stuff, not just in OTAs minicamp. We're talking all the way through training camp. And then just before the start of the season, he strolls in, busts the doors open and says, give me my contract. Let's play some football. Signs it. Goes on to win Defensive Player of the Year, lead the league with 21 and a half sacks, tied the Michael Strahan single season record. So things worked out. The last time Watt was in a contract year. He's still a good football player. But if you're expecting him to show up, I would not hold your breath. You're going to run out of air real quickly because he's in this for the long haul here when it comes to the contract negotiations. And by the sound of it, Shayne, and I heard the clip. I don't know if you got a chance to catch it. It just came out from Pat McAfee. JJ Watt was on McAfee, and he would not shed any light on the situation at all. Kind of just brushed it away. Didn't want to speak on it. And again, I don't want to read too much into it. It kind of makes me think that maybe things are not going particularly well when it comes to contract talks. And it's not hard to understand why when you sit here and think about it. It's really a two-way street, different trains of thought right now. TJ Watt is going to be 31 years old this season, which means that the Steelers are going to pay him for what he's going to do at age 32, 33, 34, maybe even 35 years old. But Myles Garrett just reset and destroyed the edge rusher market in the NFL, $40 million per season. There could be a struggle here. This could drag on for a long time. Are the Steelers willing to say yes? And you know what the agent's going to argue? It's like, you are more productive. My client is more productive than Myles Garrett. And it's true in terms of statistical production. But do the Steelers, are they willing to fold and say, yes, we're going to pay you. We're going to give you the highest contract ever handed out to a defensive player, knowing that your best years are very likely already behind you. And I think that that's going to be the holdup. I think it ultimately gets done, but don't expect it to get done anytime soon. Is that your feel from this, Shayne?
In general, yeah, I think that this is a deal that, just because of the way the Steelers operate and the fact that TJ is, already one of the best players we've seen come through the Steelers, despite their storied history on defense in particular, I think that there's no way they let him go, even if maybe at this point, and it's probably sacrilegious to say this, it might make sense for both sides for this to not be the case anymore, unfortunately. If you look at TJ right now, obviously he's in his 30s now. We just talked about that. He probably is past his prime in terms of, the peak. Granted, the peak is defensive player of the year. So you could lose a few steps from that and still be pretty good. But are you going to be $40+ million a year good? Maybe not. And even if you are, is it going to matter when you get into, the late season and Steelers might not be in the playoffs, or they might be in the playoffs, but they're in that same boat of like, well, can they beat a 2-seed Bills or a 2-seed whoever it is? It's the 7th seed. Like, that's the problem for both sides, where, yes, he could be worth the contract theoretically, but is he worth it for us? And is TJ interested in continuing to do this thing where it's like, I keep putting up these seasons and we don't do anything once we get into the playoffs? That's kind of the issue for me, at least as a fan, where it's like, I don't want to see TJ go, but I also feel like, if we're being honest with ourselves, it probably would be best for both sides potentially to let that happen.
Yeah, Shayne, TJ Watt and Cam Hayward, those are players that you want them to start and finish their careers.
Absolutely.
They're just those type of guys. They're going to go down as two of the greatest to play for this football team. Watt in particular, with all the accolades he has, the records he's breaking, already broke the sack record for the Steelers. And so those two players, like, we want them to be here. But don't be so hard on anybody that says it's in the best interest of the future to perhaps move on from those guys. They would still go down as Steelers. They would still be considered to play the vast majority of their career here. But it does make sense if the goal, Shayne, is to win a Super Bowl. What's the best way to do that? Is it to naively believe that this team is good enough to get things done right now with Mason Rudolph as your quarterback and maybe a 42-year-old Aaron Rodgers? Or is it to say, yeah, it's time, and we appreciate all of your years of service that you guys put in, but we're going to kind of clean house here, load up on draft capital, get a franchise quarterback. We're going to hit the reset button. This team will not do that. I'll make that perfectly clear.
Yeah,
like,
that's not going to happen.
That is not in their vocabulary to rebuild. They like to retool. Whether you agree with it or not, that's what they do. But there is at least a case to be made. I think the window has closed shut on the Steelers right now. And now you're getting guys in their 30s like TJ Watt, who still holds some value. It's just this team is going to fall short. Again, I'm afraid. I don't want to be a pessimist here. It's just you look at the outlook of the AFC, and you and I doing this a lot have a really good idea of what those teams look like. The Steelers are not there. And when they don't have a quarterback, then it makes it really tough.
Yeah, and again, I'm not going to sit here and say like, oh man, I'm going to be upset if the Steelers don't trade TJ Watt. Like I understand
Yeah,
from a
for
fan
sure.
perspective and even from a football perspective, like he has been the lifeblood of this team for almost a decade now at this point.
Mm-hmm.
And him and Cam and Minka for a while there too. Like that was kind of the core that kept this team going despite some of the offensive struggles. But at the same time, is he going to be good enough one to justify the $40 million a year or more he's going to get at this point in his career? Maybe not. I don't want to say for sure that he won't, but it's not trending that way at the very least. And two, is it the best thing just from a cold hard logic perspective for the Steelers and for him? Like if TJ has Super Bowl aspirations, if that's something that matters to him, and it matters to most players to win a ring at some point, he has to know at this point that it's less likely to happen for the Steelers than it is for some other teams that may be interested in his services, right? Like that's just the reality of it. Now, again, would the Steelers be willing to trade him to a team that they would have to compete with in the AFC? Probably not, but there's plenty of NFC contenders who would love to have a TJ Watt on their team, I'm sure, and would be willing to pay him that money because they were more willing to do cap stuff and whatever else. Like we were talking about before Myles Garrett got his extension, would the Eagles trade for him? Because why not? They'll just shove the money into 2032 and just because when the cap is $1 billion, they don't care. Like that's the type of stuff that other teams are willing to do that maybe the Steelers, even if they were willing to do, isn't going to necessarily help their circumstance right now.
Yeah, Shayne, I know we're going down a rabbit hole here, but you have to consider all these things. You have to think about where Watt is coming from as well. And so when his career, the sun sets on his career, and we're 5 years after he retires, and he's not a first ballot Hall of Famer, if that happens to be the case, in the voters, who I happen to know how some of these guys vote, I've talked to sources who vote on the Hall of Fame, and they value postseason success, whether it is Watt's fault or not. And it certainly is not his fault. I can assure you that.
Yeah.
But they take that into consideration. So if Watt finishes career with zero playoff wins, let alone not having that Super Bowl, obviously, are they going to vote on him to be a first ballot Hall of Fame? He's going to get into the Hall of Fame, but will he be first ballot Hall of Fame? Is that going to leave kind of a sour taste in the mark of his career? And I'll give you an example, Shayne. We saw recently, even with a comparably good in terms of production, at least, DeMarcus Ware left the Cowboys, went to Denver, won a Super Bowl with Denver, had the top ranked defense in Denver for like the first time in his career, still didn't get in on the first ballot. It took him till the second year to get into the Hall of Fame. And so Watt, he's not oblivious to these things. He knows what his career path looks like, and he knows that is something that is going to be important. And so if he's weighing that heavily, and I don't know if he is or not, and maybe it's more about the money, more about staying in Pittsburgh, whatever. I have not talked to him about this.
Yeah, we don't know.
So, but if that's something that's in the back of his mind, you can understand. It's like, all right, is this in the best interest for me? So anyway, we went way down that path. But Shayne, here's something else that I just wrote about concerning TJ Watt's contract situation. And I want to share it. Now, I will preface with this. I do not think the Steelers would ever exercise this level of dictatorship over a legendary figure on their team. But here's something that they could do theoretically that would tick Watt right off, and he wouldn't be able to do anything about it. He can play out the final year of his contract this year in 2025. 2026, the franchise tag. And they do this outdatedly. He would be classified as a linebacker. It's just what they do. I don't like the old terminology, but the franchise tag for a linebacker, $28.6 million.
Yeah.
Now, if you're thinking about right now, what's Watt going to get on his new deal? And in terms of per year money average, 40 plus million per season, 28.6. That's a saving. Now it's fully guaranteed, which it's going to be anyway in the first couple of years of his deal. And it's unmovable money, but $28.6 million. There's no, as far as I know, and I've asked around, there is nothing in place to protect seasoned veterans or award-winning players from being tagged like this. There should be, but there's not. And so what you can do, Shayne, 1 year control in 2025. I got him this season. Next year, franchise tag, $28.6 million. Oh boy, he's not going to like what's coming next. You could double slap the franchise tag on it. You could do it 3 times in a row. In the second franchise tag, Shayne, I estimated would be around $34 million. Give or take, that can change if new edge rushers sign deals. It takes the average of the top 10 salaries plus 120% of that would be the price tag. So right now it's looking like it would be about $34 million. Again, fully guaranteed, not movable, but it's cheaper than what he would earn. You could do that as many as 3 times in a row. So from starting right now, the Steelers technically have control of Watt for 4 years. They will not use it. They will not use it.
That
will not be
how they do it. Yeah.
Horrifically bad PR move. It really would. And then I guarantee you, even if they did it one time, Shayne, you would mark my words, the NFL would put a rule in place to prevent their star players from being tagged late in their careers like this, because it's just not going to happen. They don't want this dilemma like this. They want their guys to get paid. The NFLPA wants their guys to get paid.
Right.
And the Steelers could really take advantage of that tag system. Now, a lot of times you think of salary or franchise tag, you think of overpaying. Like you give the tag to Bud Dupree, overpay. Not in TJ Watt's case. You are getting a significant discount. Even on the double tag, you're getting a significant discount. You could technically do that, but it's not going to happen. They're going to reach an agreement probably in August, and then they'll get something worked out. But it's some food for thought there. And if you want to look into that, I wrote a detailed article about that on steelcurtain.com. Go check that out. Shayne, what are your thoughts just on that situation? Like, what do you think the NFL would do?
So the NFL would certainly look into that and be like, all right, this is not really what we want the franchise tag to be for. And there'd be conversations and blah, blah, blah. The other thing is, I think people talk about the franchise tag a lot and how it's bad for players and this and that. And I do agree with that in general. But I do think that you're right in the sense that, like, it could be used in much more diabolical ways than it is. Like, you really don't see guys typically get tagged more than once. When they are, like, you look at a situation like Kirk Cousins with Washington before, where they just kind of kept franchise tagging because they couldn't decide for some reason whether or not he was a good quarterback, which is a whole whatever thing. And he made a lot of money, guaranteed money on it, so I'm sure he was fine with it ultimately. But, like, you don't see that happen often because, one, it does make the player upset typically. It creates this whole thing with teams and players, they get upset. But what the franchise tag is really for a lot of the times, especially lately, it feels like, is I'm going to lock you in, and then we're going to work out a deal, and then it's going to be fine. Like, it's just to make sure that we don't have to compete with other teams right now while we try to figure out this contract. It gives us that freedom of, like, well, if we don't get a contract done, you're on the team. You can choose not to play if you don't want to, but players aren't going to do that most often. You look at that with T. Higgins, right? Like that type of stuff, right? If the Steelers did it to TJ Watt, we would know the only reason they would do that is to just take advantage of the fact that they wouldn't have to pay him as much. So that would get real ugly real fast.
That would not be a good situation. I can just tell you right now, if the Steelers foolishly did that, you can get a cap savings, but oh boy, I think you're looking at like sitting out of football type of stuff in that situation. Yeah. I think the tag where it's good for is the players that are middle of the pack, the Bud Duprees of the world, where it's like, ooh, I'll be happy to make 17 million fully guaranteed, whatever it is at the time. Like, those are the players that it would be good for. It would not be good for a superstar Hall of Famer like TJ Watt, who knows what his market value is and knows how significantly less the tag would give him than that. So, interesting though, at the very least, we're going to talk about Steelers OTAs here. If you guys are joining us in the live chat, please feel free to drop a question here for us, and we will try to get to your questions. Love to hear what you have on that situation. If you want to chime in with your thoughts on TJ Watt's contract situation, do that as well, please. All right, Shayne, let's talk about OTAs. Now, we're only 2 days into this now.
Yeah.
Only got to kind of have the notes and recap of 1 day here. And we're collecting this stuff from X, from Twitter, from what some of the beat reporters are saying out there, and some of the videos that we've seen so far. But I want to open, Shayne, with the offensive tackle situation. So it was rumored and talked about, I think, by Omar Khan even this offseason, that the plan was to move Broderick back to left tackle, Fauatanu to right tackle. Obviously, those were Steelers' first-round picks in 2023 and 2024. We have confirmation that appears to be the case now. But early in OTAs, Broderick is playing left tackle, Fauatanu is playing right tackle, And Shayne, all I got to say to Mike Tomlin and the Steelers is a big old shame on you for messing this up as badly as you did the past couple of years. You could have had Broderick Jones with 34 games of experience at left tackle already. Instead, he has one game at left tackle. Fautanu, same thing. You played left tackle all the way through college. Obviously, he had the season-ending injury last year, only got to play one game. So not as hard on them for that decision, although I do think the makeup of Fautanu in general, the nimble-footed, I will stay in front of you no matter what pass protector, is best suited at left tackle. And so there's an argument to be made that you either shouldn't have made the switch at all and should have never moved Broderick Jones to right tackle, or once you did that, kind of just leave it there because Broderick has already played the most at right tackle and Fautanu's played 4 seasons of left tackle in college. Like, why, Shayne, did Tomlin do the things that he did?
This is one of the stranger personnel things going on in the NFL over the past couple of years, where the Steelers take 2 first-round offensive tackles and decide to play them where they don't play, right? Where it just, to me, first of all, Dan Moore, which at this point I kind of almost have to shout him out because, thanks for the 3rd-round comp pick.
Yeah.
But, his existence on the team, despite the fact that, in general, getting 4 years of starting offensive tackle play, even if it's low-end offensive tackle play out of a 4th-round pick, is inherently good value, right? But the fact that he's pretty much the reason that this is even a thing is the fact that he's on the team and capable enough where they're like, let's leave him out there because he can't do anything but play left tackle. It's infuriating because now you have a guy in Broderick Jones who at this point you just have to hope going back to left tackle fixes all of his things, which it's not going to probably. Let's be real about it. Maybe he'll play better. Maybe he'll be more comfortable. It's hard to tell at this point because, again, he didn't play that much in college. So at this point, he probably has played more right tackle than left tackle in his life, at least at a high level of football. Yeah. So you have to hope that left tackle helps him going back there. And you have to hope that Fautanu, who granted looked pretty good at right tackle in the brief time we saw him last year, can make that transition fully in his 2nd year to right tackle and play well there. And you brought up the fact that he is more of that left tackle style. Now, I will say in the modern NFL, it matters less where you play in terms of your tackles. Everybody has to pass protect, everybody has to run block. Kind of is what it is. But you are right to say that I think he fits the more typical left tackle mold. At the end of the day, though, they just have to hope at this point, after all the meddling, after all the switching around, that they're going to end up still being good. Because if they're not, it's such a disaster to use 2 first-round picks on tackles and then not actually play them where they should play.
Yeah, Shayne, and forgive me for not fully trusting Mike Tomlin, the same guy that patted himself on the back for taking all the credit for benching Justin Fields and putting in Russell Wilson. This team does not always make the best personnel decisions. And so I wish that we could go back in time and play Broderick and take your freaking lumps with him at left tackle, because Dan Moore should not have been this immovable object that it's you are just too good no matter what. We drafted a guy in the 1st round. We traded up for him in the 1st round, in fact. But Dan Moore, you are so good that we can't move you. We cannot put you to the bench. We're not going to kick you sides. Let's stunt the development of our 22-year-old guy that we just drafted high in the 1st round for you. Let's do it for you, even though we had no intention of signing you to a contract extension. I just don't get the thought. It really, truly shows how short-sighted Mike Tomlin and this organization is. It is about the here and now. They're not focused on the future, because if you were, the outlook of your offensive line, I think, would be a lot more encouraging at this point. And right now, it's both of these guys are rookies. We have no information on them, essentially, because Broderick's now playing a new position, essentially, for him in the NFL. If Fautanu had the injury last year and he's playing a new position. So it's starting from scratch once again. And we expect nothing less of this organization sometimes. But hopefully Tomlin proved us right and that the Steelers made the right decision and these guys will pick things up really quickly.
Yeah, hopefully. And the only person who couldn't move Dan Moore is apparently Mike Tomlin, by the way. So that's the only person who couldn't move him.
I love that.
But we'll see. Yeah.
I got to get one last Dan Moore jab in
One
there.
more.
So,
No,
but again, thank you
he's
again
fine in
for
Tennessee.
giving us that 3rd round pick. Yeah, I'm sure that was not a waste of $82 million that the Titans just.
I mean, they can't do a lot worse than they did last year. Let's be fair, for what it is. But yeah,
it's true. Desperate times call for desperate measures. The other OTA notes that I have here, I talk about Caleb Johnson for a second. There's everybody saying, oh, he's looking the part right now. Is that running back 1 potentially? He's coming in. He's got the build. He looks like the guy that can be the future to carry that load. Not that he necessarily will right away because Jaylen Warren's there, obviously. But it's encouraging to at least hear that. You see the clips of him, obviously moves very well. He just said too, I think to the media, that he clocked in at 22 miles an hour last he checked. And so he's obviously making it known the speed is not a concern. There's not a lot to report. And I'm not going to make a bigger deal of it than what it is. We're seeing Caleb Johnson with a helmet and shorts right now, essentially, but people are pleased with him so far.
Yeah, and he certainly is in that category of first off the bus type of guys where you're just like, that dude looks different than some guys. He just does. And I think that there's an element of that that's good to see, I guess, for a guy that is, built the way he is, does he look the part, right? And I think in his case, he absolutely does. And I think the question ultimately with him, and we'll get into this because we're going to talk about, our most valuable players for 2025. It just comes down to how much of the workload is he going to ultimately have? Because I think the best version of Jaylen Warren is the guy that is that change of pace, not scat back necessarily, but receiving back, guy that can make explosive plays occasionally, but not somebody I want to hand 25 touches to, right? So if Johnson plays well enough to kind of take over essentially the Najee Harris role of the primary runner in this backfield, he could certainly have a big season as a rookie and kind of get this offense maybe going in the right direction on the ground at least.
Yeah, absolutely. We talked about how good of a scheme fit and everything he is. And so the fact that he looks like he's in that NFL shape already is a good sign.
Yeah.
The Steelers, Cam Hayward also talked about Derek Harmon, praised the 1st round pick. And I got a couple of quotes here. Let me pull it up. I think he's got a good body. He moves well, plays with his hands, definitely gets on the edge a lot more than other younger guys. I think it's just computing that to our scheme and getting guys caught up. And then he said, this kid is very inquisitive. He asks a lot of questions outside of just football. He wants to be good. He has a good head on his shoulders. There's not a lot of him being boastful. I did it this way. I did it that way. He's really just trying to learn. So basically just a glowing endorsement from Cam so far. We're 2 days into OTAs, and so take it for what it is. But we kind of got that impression from Harmon all along. You go back and listen to his NFL Combine interviews. He's that type of guy, and it does seem like that he is a football player through and through.
Yeah, I think the key thing and kind of the takeaway from what Cam said is I think if Derek Harmon doesn't succeed in the NFL, it's not going to be for a lack of trying. It's not going to be for a lack of trying to do the right things and do things the right way in general. So, and I think honestly, as a rookie and with a player coming in, that's almost the most you can ask for, to be honest with you. Now with some players, you hear so many stories of guys who didn't work out, and it's almost always well, they didn't watch film or they didn't care enough or this or that. It's that's not going to be Derek Harmon's issue if there is one. And I think you look at him athletically, that's probably not going to be the issue either. So that really lines up well for a player that's probably going to be pretty good as a Steeler, you hope so.
Yeah, Shayne, and it's why I described Harmon during the pre-draft process as a guy that has a high floor and a high ceiling. I think the high floor comes in because the motor is relentless, obviously. You combine that with the football character that he possesses and the athletic traits, already getting 55 pressures, which led all defensive linemen, would have been good among 12th among all edge rushers, even in the FBS. And so very impressive stuff. So when you have that type of energy, effort, character, and you're that type of athlete, I think the floor is high for Harmon as well. So good stuff to hear from Cam there, at least. Shayne, and one more thing I want to talk to or ask about is the quarterback situation right now. Again, we're early. It's OTAs. Doesn't mean that much. But from the reports, the quarterbacks had a really rough first day of practice. That's super hard to believe when you consider who they are. Will Howard in his first ever OTA. Mason Rudolph, who's had a couple of good games in his career, but didn't really play well for the Titans last year. And so considering the quarterback situation, not all that surprising, but obviously that's going to have to turn around.
Yeah, unfortunately with Will Howard, like you could kind of tell by his combine performance, he might not be the best in shorts guy of all time, if that makes sense to anyone. There's some guys who just don't look particularly great in practice. I do think Howard is more of a gamer than anything else, and I think that shows when you watch him play at Ohio State. Maybe that isn't a huge concern for him at least. And then Mason is, we know Mason at this point. I'm not too concerned about him in practice at this point.
All right, Shayne. So what is to watch for next? Like is there a player that you have your eye on the rest of these OTA practices? Who do you want to see or hear from?
Roman Wilson, for sure.
That was mine. You stole
it. I'm sure it is.
Yeah.
I mean, it just right now, like you look at this receiving core, and it's like DK Metcalf and a lot of hopes and prayers for the most part. Like that's kind of where we're at. Like we saw more from Calvin Austin last year, which is great. Hopefully he could be that designated gadget / deep threat guy again and can do some stuff there. But I mean, outside of him, like Robert Woods is well into his 30s and just isn't an impactful receiver anymore. But he'll probably play a lot because they love the veteran receivers who are 5 steps away from what they used to be. And then it's Roman Wilson pretty much. Like if you want someone to emerge from this group that can actually be like a piece long term, it's really just him. Like we kind of know what everyone else is. Yeah. He's the only one that's really a question mark at this point.
Yeah, that's the easy answer because there's a very realistic route for him to be the wide receiver 2 in Pittsburgh, which is a very important position. And so if he can emerge as that guy, that's what we all want to see. Not as excited about Calvin Austin at this point going into year 4. We know who he is, I think, right now. I don't dislike Austin. It's just the longer you're into your career, the less hope you have of ever hitting that ceiling, we would say, or what you could be. Roman Wilson's played 5 snaps in the NFL. And so he got injured on the first padded practice of training camp last year, had the hamstring injury shortly after he came back. And so I want to see what he has. Can he be a guy who can be a wide receiver 2, or is he a wide receiver 3, like most suspect that he is? Either way, you got to figure out what he is. The other name I would throw out there, Shayne, is Cole Holcomb, who's seeing the field for the first time in a long time, since halfway through the 2023 season, had the gruesome injury where his knee kind of buckled inside out, hit by friendly fire there. What does he have left in the tank at this point? Is he going to make the roster? He's not going to have anything injury related, I hope, at this stage of his career. And if he does, that might be it for him. Yeah. But is he ready to come out there and play? He looks rocked up too. I don't know if you've seen pictures of him floating around there, but
working out a lot, I'm sure. Yeah.
So I'll be interested to see what he can provide come training camp. All right. If you are a fan of the Pittsburgh Steelers and would like to support the Steel Curtain podcast, please consider subscribing to the Steel Curtain podcast on YouTube. We appreciate your support. As you can see, I'm fighting through a cold today, so just bear with me. We're going to get through this. Now we are going to do our rankings. Shayne and I are going to rank the top 10 most valuable players on the Pittsburgh Steelers 2025 roster ahead of this upcoming season. So that is in terms of value, the value they possess to the team, and not necessarily the best overall players. And so I think that you'll find this list intriguing for sure. Shayne, do you want to go back and forth with these?
So I think we can go 10-1, but we'll kind of go your 10, my 10, or however you want to do the order of it, but we'll go 10-1 from that order. Yeah.
Okay, Shayne, let's do your list first, and then I'll back clean up here. So go ahead and give us your number 10 player, most valuable on the Steelers.
So I did kind of, this is a bit of a cop out. I put just whoever the quarterback ultimately is. And I put that because on a team like the Steelers, the quarterback seems to matter less than almost any other team, but for the wrong reasons, right? Because they just win regardless for the most part. But I do think that you have to throw the quarterback in here if you're being real about most valuable players and stuff like that. So whoever it ultimately is, I do think that obviously if it's Aaron Rodgers, maybe you bump it up a little bit from 10, but realistically, the quarterback isn't going to be the biggest factor on this team regardless, just with how they play. But I wanted to slot whoever that ultimately ends up being in here. So,
okay. Are you kicking it back to me now? Is that what
you can go? Yeah.
Okay. So my number 10 player, And when we get to the end of this list, you'll find that I left somebody off, and it's going to infuriate some people, but I'll explain my reasoning.
Yeah.
My number 10 player, most valuable player for the Steelers in 2025 is Nick Herbig. Probably thinking a guy coming off the bench. Yeah, he's that good as a situational pass rusher. He's a splash playmaker. He earned the 4th best pass rush grade among all players in the NFL last year for Pro Football Focus. He's only going to continue to get better. He's 23 and a half years old right now. So he's as young as some of these guys coming into this year's draft, even though he's entering year 3. I have high hopes for him. And I think that as Herbert continues to develop and grow and get better, he's going to cut into Highsmith and Watt's workload a little bit. And he should, because those guys need a break. This is a legitimate spark coming off the bench who can be an X factor for this defense. So I've got Nick Herbig as the 10th most valuable player for the Steelers this year. Shayne, on to you for number 9.
Yeah, just a side note with Herbig, he would have probably been 10 for me if I didn't want to throw the quarterback position in there in general. So I think you and I are on the same page. Just again, it's so valuable to have somebody who can be that third edge for you. So for me, number 9, I have Peyton Wilson, linebacker. Honestly, the problem that I have with like I wanted to put a linebacker on this list, right? And I'm not a big Patrick Queen fan, to say the least, and I'm just not. I do think Peyton Wilson's best linebacker on this team. Now, does he have issues defending the run at this point? Yes. But does Patrick Queen also have issues defending the run at this point? Also, yes. And at least Peyton Wilson can cover about as well as anybody at the linebacker position from an athletic standpoint, especially, right? So for me, his ability last year, even as a rookie in coverage, kind of you don't see it very often from especially rookie linebackers, but just linebackers in general. It's tough in the NFL to cover effectively as a linebacker. There's so much thrown at you. There's so many different ways teams can attack you. And we saw that with Queen on the negative end of things, but with Wilson kind of on the positive end of things. So he's a guy that if he takes a step up this year as a run defender, could be by far this team's best linebacker midway through the season without really anyone questioning it at this point.
Yeah, Shayne, absolutely. I was super encouraged by what I saw from him last season. My number 9 player is actually one of the rookies, Caleb Johnson. And typically, my stance on running backs. I think that there's a lot that has to go right for them to be successful. I think you're going to see a noticeable difference in the running game right away. If I had to predict, because I think going from a player like Najee to Caleb Johnson, who is such a different player, they're both big, strong guys, but has a true wide zone runner with a lot more of the top end speed once you get out in space. I think you're going to see that explosive play rate clip go up like 300% from what it was last year. Like, I think it's going to make a big difference. And we know the Steelers want to revolve their offense around their run game. I think he's going to end up being one of the 10 most valuable players for the Steelers this year. That's why I have him at number 9.
Yeah, and I tend to agree with you because I have him at number 8. We can leave him up on the screen here. For me, again, like a rookie running back, it's any rookie, even rookie running back, it's tough to kind of put in the top 10, especially for a value list. But this team's best chance of being a top half league offense relies on him being an excellent rookie running back. Like, that is the path, in my opinion, because again, you're probably not getting a ton from the receiving group outside of DK. Maybe you get enough out of the combination of guys behind him to kind of make the passing offense work. But realistically, their best chance of putting up points consistently and keeping drives going is Caleb and Jaylen Warren, of course, too, but mostly Caleb toting the rock and doing so very efficiently, right? That's the kind of the thing we've been missing from this run game is not so much volume or even overall success at times. It's that explosiveness you talked about, the element of, can you get me a 40-yard run to get us into field goal range when we need it? Can you break away for a 50-yard touchdown? Like, we just haven't seen plays like that from this running back group in a long time. So to me, he very easily makes this list. And if he isn't on this list by the end of the season as valuable players, that probably means the offense didn't do so well.
Yeah, you're probably right. Ironically, Shayne, my number 8 is Peyton Wilson. And so we kind of just flip-flop those two. For the same reasons that you mentioned already. I like Peyton Wilson today better than I like Patrick Queen. I just think that he's probably already a more consistent player, and he's a splashier playmaker. Obviously, there's nothing he can't do athletically. Ran the 4.43 at the combine. That speed shows up on film. Had the scoop and score last year. Had the interception, one-handed pick, excuse me, all the way down the sideline. So Peyton Wilson grabs my number 8 spot here.
Yeah, so my number 7 here is a player that I'm ranking because I'm hopeful that he is going to, one, play up to his talent level, and he has to, in my opinion, for the secondary to kind of work, is Joey Porter Jr., right? He has to play better this year. He does. And that's the key to this corner room working, because you bring in Darius Slade to kind of solidify that number 2 corner role, at least. That's what we think he'll do this year. But Joey has to be this team's number 1 corner. Like, that's the only path to the secondary being above average in terms of
Mm.
coverage, is for him to kind of make good on his potential. We know how sticky he can be in coverage and the length and all that stuff. The penalties have to come down. He has to get more comfortable in different facets of the game. And if he doesn't, this coverage unit could get exploited pretty often, especially if Darius Slade turns out to be too far over the hill to really be a reliable second corner.
Yeah, for sure. My number 7 player, Shayne, is Derek Harmon, Steelers' first round pick, because I think the upgrade from Larry Ogunjobi, you slide Harmon into that spot. He's a money 5 position. He is a rookie, but he has a chance to make an impact right away. He has a chance to alleviate pressure from a Cam Hayward, from a TJ Watt. Even he's probably going to play next to TJ Watt over there in base defense. You can slide him up and down the defensive line. I think that if he's not one of the team's 10 most valuable players, that means it's probably a pretty slow learning curve, because he should be in that discussion. I have him number 7, and I wouldn't be surprised, Shayne, if he, from season 1, looked like their best interior rusher. Like, he's got that kind of upside at the position. Benton's good at it. Cam is obviously good at it with the power and long arm that he can do from the inside, but Harmon has so much juice there. I think he's going to give him a lot, and I think he's going to be roughly the 7th most valuable player on the team this year.
So I hope you're right, because he did not make my list, because I do not trust them to play him early. I think that he may not play. I just don't trust. I don't think he'll be on the field much until
that's fair.
midway through the season. And I hope I'm wrong about that. But Steelers have shown us, and Mike Tomlin has shown us that he doesn't want these dudes to play early. I don't know why exactly in some of the cases. Sometimes I get it. If they're really young and they don't know what they're doing at all yet, and you don't want to just throw them out there. I don't really view Harmon that way. I think he has enough going for him right now, even though I do think he has a ways to go to be a full-time player, where he should be playing a lot. Until they show their willingness to do that, I'm not going to put him on the list. But I certainly hope you're right about him being one of those valuable players. For me, at number 6, and I know this is one of I think the only other difference in our list overall, I have Deshaun Elliott at 6 here. I think he's the best safety on this team at this point. I think Minka still has his role as that deep safety and can take some stuff away, but he hasn't been the playmaker that he was early in his Steelers career for a couple of years now. I don't think he's as valuable even in that kind of just taking stuff away and getting coverage away from guys that he used to be. And Elliott was just so phenomenal last year, especially as a run defender. But he was good enough in coverage. He wasn't great or anything like that, but this is one of the best tacklers in the sport last year. I think he missed like less than 5% of his tackles or something like that. Like, he just is so reliable in that part of the game. And you saw the amount of plays he made in the backfield, coming downhill, taking stuff away in that regard. Like, he's kind of the glue of the secondary, in my opinion, at this point. And I'm hoping that if he repeats this success, that even though he's not a super young player necessarily, I do hope he sticks around for a couple more years if he repeats that success from 2024.
Yeah, absolutely. Elliott was phenomenal, better than we ever could have expected last year. He would get an honorable mention for me, just barely misses this list, which is tightly contested for sure.
Yeah.
Going back to my number 6 player, Shayne, is Joey Porter Jr., who you already mentioned. Whether you are a believer in Porter right now or not, we can argue that he took a step back in year 2, and I think that's completely fair. He has got to clean up the grabbiness of the penalties. But in terms of importance to this team, your number 1 corner being able to lock down the opposing team's best wide receiver is critically important. And I think in year 3, he's going to take a step forward. I think he'll be able to do that better than he has in his first 2 seasons. But so much hinges on Porter's leap if he can do that this year.
Absolutely. Yeah. For me, number 5, I have DK Metcalf, the Steelers' big offseason acquisition coming in here. I'm not the biggest Metcalf fan. We've talked about this on this show multiple times. We've talked about other places. But it's hard to deny that he's at least one of the 5 most valuable. You could definitely have him higher, and I think you do. But realistically, for me, this is where the offense and the passing game has to go through now, because of the way they've set this up. And I am a little bit skeptical of that working. I'm not going to lie. I do think he is a fringe top 32 receiver in the league. So running an offense through him primarily might be really hard to do, in my opinion, even if it's going to be that vertical kind of big play offense in the passing game. At least that's what it seems like they're trying to do here. But his success and how well he's able to handle that role is going to be what matters for the Steelers passing game in 2025, regardless of who the quarterback is. He has to be able to win vertically early, often, consistently. It's just kind of what it has to be. And if he doesn't, this passing game could see even a tick back from what it was last year, potentially.
Yeah, Shayne, I think that's a perfectly fair assessment of Metcalf's skill set. My number 5, I've got an offensive lineman, Zach Frazier, and I hesitate to put a center here because I know that in general, centers aren't the most valuable, but Frazier is that one piece on the offensive line that we can definitively say right now, this guy is very good, possibly with a chance to be elite. Like he graded out as a top 5 center last year. Not hard to see why. He was consistent. He was a mauler in the run game, always finishing blocks. And so this is the guy that I trust more than anybody else on the offensive line. You can't have your center cave in. You don't want you need to create a pocket. And so I would put him as high as number 5 in terms of value to this team because he's kind of the anchor to this entire unit right now and the one guy that we can trust.
Yeah, I totally agree. And we will hear his name again soon. Not quite yet. For me, I have Alex Highsmith as my number 4 player here. And you could argue pretty easily last year that at least on like a per snap basis, Highsmith was the most effective edge rusher on the team in terms of pressure, at least, right? Consistently pressured the quarterback. He was on pace for, I think it was 70, 80 pressures in a fully healthy season, which would have been a phenomenal number. Yeah. Like, this is a guy who is well worth the contract that some people didn't like whenever he signed a couple years ago. Like, well worth it over the past years. The sack numbers aren't as high as they were in the 1 year, but the consistent pressure, we know how effective he is with his spins and the ability to bend the edge. Like, him and Watt, obviously, who we'll talk about later, definitely in terms of just pure edge duo is the best in the league, in my opinion, at this point, and by most people's opinion, I would assume. But you can't really understate how good it is to have a player like him opposite of a TJ Watt, where teams can't just say, well, if we just block TJ Watt, we'll be fine. Not so much with this team.
Yeah, Shayne, we lined up again. My number 4 is also Alex Highsmith for the same reasons that you mentioned. Some people will say, yeah, well, he doesn't draw the attention. It's true. But what does he do in those one-on-one situations? He'll kill you around the edge with the speed, the spin move, the dip. So he is very consistent in terms of generating pressure on the quarterback. He earns my number 4 spot. Just a really good, well-rounded football player. And one of the best players on the roster. I have him number 4 heading into the season. Shayne, who's your number 3?
My number 3 is Zach Frazier, the center.
Okay.
Again, like, a center is not usually the most valuable position on the offensive line. However, I would argue, depending on what offensive line we're talking about, what type of scheme we're talking about, it can vary a little bit there. But like you said, he's the only piece that I feel with any major confidence is even close to a top 5 player's position on the offensive line. And he already graded out as one, like you said, last year. And I think he's only going to get better. He's that classic center archetype now where it's like absolutely brutal in the run game, destroys people, makes the run game go, and then isn't necessarily like a lockdown pass protector, but when he does lose, it's usually slowly. He is getting maybe driven back a little bit, but he's holding his ground and can anchor down and kind of prevent guys from winning quickly, which is the key with internal pressures. It cannot be quick, because if it's quick, I don't care who the quarterback is outside of like 3 dudes on the planet, they're probably going to mess the play up if you let interior pressure quickly. So he's the kind of guy that can consistently be a top 5 player's position, and I couldn't really put him lower than 3 if that's the case.
Yeah, Shayne, and once he gets those 11-inch bear mitts on you, he just wants to grab those shoulder pads and drive you to the ground. So I love his tenacity, super high hopes for him. I have to admit, I was too low on him during the pre-draft process. He's already exceeded my expectations. So excited for what he can be on this team. My number 3 spot, Shayne, and it sounds disrespectful to have him this low for some reason, but is Cam Hayward. Cam Hayward, 3 is really good. That's nothing to scoff about at all. Getting older at this stage of his career, I don't know if I would expect him to have the same season that he had last year, but I think he's still going to be really good. He's still an immovable object on the defensive line who can kind of bully people around. I think that Hayward is still a good football player, has obviously the run defense chops that you could want, the two gapping ability, toss somebody to the side, make the tackle at the line of scrimmage. Like that stuff is all extremely valuable. He's not going to offer the same amount of pass rush juice that he has in years past, which is understandable at this stage of his career, but still a very valuable, very well-rounded overall asset for the Steelers in 2025.
Yeah, and he will stay on the screen here because he is my number 2 player. And I think at this point, I'm just going to go ahead and assume he's going to be the same dude until he's not. Like, it's kind of where I've reached where, like, maybe that is being too optimistic. But every time I think, even for a minute, that he's not quite the same player, he just does it again, except for when he was injured, obviously, in 2023. Like, the whole conversation last year about, like, oh, give him a contract extension and all this stuff. He immediately just makes everybody shut up, like, the second the season started, pretty much. And it's kind of hilarious at this point when I hear people, like, because I remember there was this, he was, like, feuding with this one guy who, like, always says he's the reason the Steelers lose or something like that. I'm like, do you guys have something better to do besides this? Like, you have to be messing around. So, like, find something better to do than do that. But anyway, like, he's kind of outside of TJ, obviously, who we'll be talking about here in a minute, I'm sure, is just he's the reason the Steelers are what they are, even though they haven't been quite what we want them to be. The only reason they're even competitive oftentimes is because of a guy like him.
Yeah, and he did not get much help from his interior defensive line teammates last year in terms of run defense, at least.
Especially,
so he was kind of the sole anchor there on the middle of that defensive line. My number 2, Shayne, and then we've got a bit of a discrepancy here, so I want to hear your thoughts, but I have DK Metcalf as the number 2 in terms of value. Now, Hayward is better in respect to his position, but in terms of value of this team, if you don't have Metcalf, your offense is going to flat out suck. Like, you don't have anybody to throw the ball to. Maybe Roman Wilson emerges as that guy, but because of the lack of depth at receiver, because you traded George Pickens away, it's Metcalf or bust kind of on offense in terms of go-to options in the passing game. And he needs to be that guy. I think he's going to slide in and essentially do what Pickens was doing for the most part last year, which is a pretty valuable player. Had it been Pickens on the team and not Metcalf, I still might have Pickens at this spot, just knowing the value of the wide receiver position. I know that, agree with it or not, PFF's WAR, wins above replacement, has wide receivers second to only quarterback in terms of their overall value, what they offer. And if you think about it, scoring points, there's nothing more important than that. Your quarterback can help you do that, but you got to have a good wide receiver. I think that Metcalf, just strictly in terms of value, based on the Steelers roster makeup, is the second most valuable player on this roster in 2025. Shayne, your chance for rebuttal against this.
I think that is it makes total sense, right? Like, just from a value proposition standpoint, like, he is the passing offense realistically, like, especially the explosive passing offense. If we're going to have one, it's going to be because of DK. My concern is I don't necessarily think that's going to work out that well, regardless of who the quarterback is. And I do think that even if he plays really well, I don't know how good this passing offense is going to be. And so for me, I ultimately kind of weighed that a little bit in the sense that, like, yes, he's very valuable to the passing game, but how valuable is this passing game ultimately going to be, kind of regardless of how good he is or isn't? To me, I think that they kind of top out as like a middle of the pack team, regardless of how well he plays, because they just don't have a ton around him, right? Like, he's going to get a lot of coverage. He's going to get a lot of, targets as well, but he hasn't really shown that he can make good on, especially like contested targets. He's probably going to have a lot of them this year, because who else are you really worried about getting open down the field, right? It's going to be him and kind of against the world. So I hope that you're right, that he ends up more closer to 2 on this list in terms of the value he brought. But it's kind of why I knocked him down a couple spots, even though I do understand the value proposition there.
Yeah, and I get that. And Hayward is no doubt a better football player. I kind of had this scenario playing in my mind too. Like, Shayne, if one were to pop an Achilles or tear an ACL, like, which one would be more detrimental to the team? I think both would be catastrophic, like losing Hayward or Metcalf. I just don't see any way you can get your offense going if he's not there. You at least have to have some semblance of a wide receiver 1. Otherwise, you're dropping down to a group of wide receiver 3 and 4s, and that's not good. That's not going to result well.
And to be fair, too, Cam, if he were to go down, that would open Derek Harmon up to come up. And
I mean,
So
well, then he would get the ultimate test there.
right.
Shayne, I have a feeling I know where you're going with
Yeah,
this one,
I
but
think
go
we
ahead and
can
give
just
us your number one.
we could just talk about TJ Watt for a second. I mean, he until proven otherwise, which again last year I will say personally, I do think if we're just judging seasons, I think Cam
Mhm.
might have been just as good, if not better, than TJ last year. But at this point, it's TJ Watt still. Like until he isn't, he is basically is kind of the best way to describe it. This guy who, despite having slightly less production than we normally expect from him, it's still 11 and a half sacks, it's 6 forced fumbles, it's plays all over the field, being the best run defender in the sport of his position, especially as a playmaker. This is kind of the linchpin of this entire team, and we've known that for a long time. If I had it, I'd put up your graphic of like how the Steelers play without TJ Watt. It's just bad, straight up, not good. So we know how valuable he is.
Oh yeah, yeah. I don't think that there's a particularly close second. Although I love Metcalf, I think that I love Hayward. I think that Metcalf is going to be very valuable in terms of like we said, the roster makeup. But it's Watt. Like if you don't have TJ Watt, even with Highsmith and Herbig, like I think would be at least a fine pairing together.
Yeah,
Looks a lot better when Watt is in the picture.
Yeah.
Watt was the most accounted player for in terms of chips last year, charted by Pro Football Focus. They know where he's going to be, unfortunately, because Terrell Austin's not very creative.
No.
But it also takes a lot to account for him. And he didn't do the most with it. He could have probably done more with it last year. You can critique him for that. That's fine. But the other thing I'll say about Watt, Shayne, is the last time he just broke the bank and got a massive payday, became the league's richest defensive player. That did not cut his motivation even a little bit to go out and produce a all-time level statistical production season. I still think that he's going to have a bounce back year going into age 31 season here for the Steelers. I think he's going to show pretty clearly why there is no discussion again that he is that guy. So TJ Watt, my number one as well. And so Shayne, that brings me to the elephant in the room. If you are paying attention and keeping track of these in your mind, we did not have Minkah Fitzpatrick on this list.
And I had Deshaun Elliott on this list.
And it's not, and I didn't have Elliott, but Elliott would have just missed it. Fitzpatrick would have just narrowly missed it as well. But Fitzpatrick is not, in terms of value, again, this is all in terms of value. First of all, the deep safety position is not what it used to be. It's not like it's Ed Reed in the early 2000s where it's like there's guys throwing YOLO balls all the time and you got a chance to make plays back there. Whether it's because of Fitzpatrick or not, he just hasn't made plays in the secondary. Now you can say, well, the teams haven't been targeting him as much. When they do, they've got a lower pass rating. All that's fair and well. But when Peyton Wilson's making more splash plays than you, more involved in the defense overall because he plays closer to the line of scrimmage, it's like it's hard to argue that Fitzpatrick should be in there. And I think if you argue that he should, it should be lower on the list of 10, maybe like the 8 to 10 range. I just kind of value the safety position less now than it seems like we ever had. And like you said, Shayne, Elliott was the guy that stood out last year. Elliott was the guy who was phenomenal tackler, made more splash plays. He played closer to the line of scrimmage, so he was more involved, undoubtedly, than what Fitzpatrick was. And I know, again, this is not all Fitzpatrick's fault. It's the way of the quick passing game in today's NFL, the cover twos, all that kind of stuff. But he just has not been the same playmaker for the Steelers.
No, and a lot of it isn't necessarily his fault in the sense that, again, like the true deep safety role, it obviously is still important in the NFL. You have to be able to keep the top on the defense, but teams are attacking the middle of the field more. They're attacking outside the numbers, up the sidelines more. They're not targeting guys like Minkah Fitzpatrick as much as they used to and giving him opportunities to make plays on the football. So for him to be valuable, or at least more valuable, he'd have to kind of play more of that like hybrid slot safety role that's really popular in the NFL now that I think he theoretically could do, but that's not really how he's used, right? There was more Deshaun Elliott. He played a lot of snaps in the slot. He was up against the line of scrimmage. And I think if you want to be a really truly impactful safety in the modern NFL, you kind of do have to either move around a lot or you have to be just so good in that like robber role, like a Jesse Bates for Atlanta, for example, that you're able to create plays kind of on your own and just kind of freelance and do what you got to do. That's kind of the only safeties I think that are worth the type of contract that Minkah's currently on. And that's why I say, is he going to be on this team beyond this year? Like, I'm not sure about that at this point. Like, we know how much Mike Tomlin loves him and we know how good of a player he has been, but he's either going to have to be used a little bit differently, I think, to make up for the value that's lost from him not getting as many chances to make plays in his role, or they're going to have to do something with him there.
Yeah, Shayne, and it's worth noting that Minkah has 1 interception since the 2022 season. We are entering season 2025 now. You're just not getting your money's worth. Both can be true. Minkah can be a really good football player, but the contract can also look pretty bad. And I think that that's where we are right now with Minkah. I think that there is a legitimate discussion to be had there. Don't brush it away like it's nothing. Yes, he does hold value in terms of threatening in the deep safety position, threatening over the middle of the field where you don't want to throw the ball there. But at some point, you have to do more than that. You have to earn that paycheck by making plays as well. You can't just say, well, lack of production means that I'm doing my job. And in some ways that it does, but that's not to that level of contract. And so I think that's where we are with him right now. Again, amazing career. He's going to go down as a very good football player. I don't know if it's going to be Hall of Fame level. I think he still has a little bit more. I have to reach a little bit higher with the accolades there. It's not out of the question. And then maybe some of that depends on what happens these next couple seasons here. But yeah, we left him off the list. I think this was the first time ever that I had left him off of
I think so
top
too.
ranking like this.
Yeah, it's just tough. Like it just is, because again, if we're going off of production and who's going to be the most valuable, he doesn't play a role that really allows him to be the most valuable that he can be. Now, if they change that up this year, if we see him play closer to line a little bit more often, maybe that'll change. Maybe he can jump a couple routes over the middle of the field. Maybe he can line up on tight ends and take care of them out of the slot and stuff like that. But if he just plays a deep safety role, I just don't know if the value is going to be there.
Yeah, agreed. Shayne, was there anybody else that you had considered putting on this list, or was it just Minkah that just missed out?
Yeah, I mean, Minkah's obviously kind of the top one that made it out, and he might have been 10 if I wasn't, wanting to put the quarterback position on this list somewhere just to do it. Jaylen Warren, even though he might not be a full-time player, never has been, he's been so effective in the snaps he's gotten, so it's kind of hard not to want to put him on there. Like, that's really, I mean, you know how much I like Keanu Benson, but he still has to show more to me before I put him in a list like this. But yeah, that's kind of the main guy I would say is Minkah.
Yeah, Shayne, I don't think I meant to open. My caveat was I did not include a quarterback at all. You had yours number 10. I didn't include it just because we don't even really know who the
we don't. But like, no matter who it is, I'm like, yeah, you're going to be probably the bottom of the list.
Yeah, and it is quarterback, so by default, it's already a more valuable position. But I chose to leave it off the list entirely. The other one, Shayne, I'll throw a super long shot. Like, where did that come from? Out there. But again, we talk about the war, the wins above replacement. Roman Wilson, if he proves to be that guy this year,
if he's good,
but it's so early, and that's why I don't want to count my chickens before they hatch here. So early, I think he would be the sleeper on this list to have the potential to crack inside of there and say, yeah, you truly are a top 10 valuable player. We've seen it happen. We've seen Deontay Johnson and these guys emerge in the past where it's like, yeah, what would we do without you now that we have you? So hopefully that ends up being the case for Roman Wilson. You said it best with Benton as well, who also just missed my list. Needs to
should shout out Pat Furman too. I know he's kind of
just a solid football player.
He's also definitely, at least until further notice, the second best receiving weapon we have technically.
Yeah.
So like, I kind of feel like he has to be at least mentioned there. But yeah, I chose not to put him on. But yeah.
Okay, what do you guys think of our list? We just went through and ranked our top 10 most valuable Steelers on the 2025 roster ahead of the upcoming season. If you agree, disagree, drop it in the chat down below. If you guys liked this listen, please tell your friends about it. Like the stream, leave us a comment. That would go a long way for us. We want to continue to bring this content to you. We go live every single Wednesday at 1:30 p.m. Eastern time. Also check out Josh Yoris' show live on Mondays at 1:30 p.m. Eastern time. Thank you all for joining us on the show today. You can follow Shayne on X at Shayne Kubas. You can follow me on X at Tommy Jaggi. You can download the Still Curtain podcast wherever you get your podcasts. Also check us out on YouTube or ask Alexa to play the Still Curtain Steelers podcast. And thanks again for listening to the Still Curtain podcast.